President Trump on Tuesday hit back at the executives who have stepped down from his advisory council. Speaking at Trump Tower in New York after announcing an infrastructure initiative, Mr. Trump said that the executives were not taking their jobs seriously and suggested they had stepped down from his manufacturing advisory council because they were making products overseas. They're leaving out of embarrassment, because they make their products outside, Mr. Trump said. Mr. Trump's remarks came amid a growing rift between the White House and the business community that has emerged since the weekend's violence in Charlottesville, VA, and criticism of Mr. Trump's response to it. 6 members in 2 days have stepped down from the president's Manufacturing Jobs Initiative. One of them, Scott Paul, the president of the American Alliance for Manufacturing, a non-profit group, said on Twitter on Tuesday morning that he was quitting the White House effort because it's the right thing for me to do. I'm resigning from the Manufacturing Jobs Initiative because it's the right thing for me to do, Scott Paul at Scott Paul August 15, 2017. After Mr. Trump's fiery news conference, 2 more participants resigned: Richard L. Trumka, the president of the AFL-CIO, and Thea Lee, until recently the Labor group's deputy chief of staff. I cannot sit on a council for a president that tolerates bigotry and domestic terrorism, Mr. Trumka wrote on Twitter. I resign, effective immediately. On Monday evening, Douglas McMillon, the chief executive of Walmart, sent a letter to employees that was critical of the president. As we watched the events and the response from President Trump over the weekend, we too felt that he missed a critical opportunity to help bring our country together by unequivocally rejecting the appalling actions of white supremacists, said Mr. McMillon, who was remaining on a different advisory panel. His remarks today were a step in the right direction, and we need that clarity and consistency in the future. At Trump Tower, Mr. Trump responded to Mr. McMillon's statement. The head of Walmart, who I know, he is a very nice guy, was making a political statement, Mr. Trump said. When asked about Merck, the drug maker whose chief executive, Kenneth C. Frazier, was the first to step down on Monday, Mr. Trump said he had been pressuring executives to return jobs to the United States. I've been lecturing them, including the gentleman that you're referring to, about you have to bring it back to this country, he said. Doug McMillon, Walmart's chief executive, said President Trump missed a critical opportunity to help bring our country together. Spencer Tye, Associated Press. Images for Walmart. Mr. Trump took office boasting of his business bona fides. The first billionaire chief executive to reside in the White House, he promised to bring boardroom deal-making to Washington and surrounded himself with presidential advisory councils stacked with big-name CEOs. But as controversy continues to swirl around the White House, the dozens of executives who agreed to serve on the president's advisory groups are increasingly finding themselves at the center of unwanted debates. This should be his strong suit, courting CEOs, said Douglas Brinkley, a presidential historian at Rice University. Instead, Trump finds himself with CEOs not wanting to be in a photo op with the president. What should have been an honor has become an albatross. Dozens of executives remain on the various councils, including the leaders of Boeing, Amazon and Oracle. And since taking office, Mr. Trump has met with hundreds of business leaders. The President's Strategic and Advisory Forum, a council convened by the private equity executive Stephen A. Schwarzman at Mr. Trump's behest, met with much fanfare in both February and early April, with participants like J.P. Morgan Chase's chief executive Jamie Dimon, and IBM's chief, Ginni Rometty, in attendance. But amid scheduling conflicts and dropouts, no meetings have since occurred. And no meetings of the Strategic and Advisory Forum are scheduled. For business leaders, the invitation to advise the president is traditionally a coveted distinction. In general, it's good for your reputation if the president asks you to serve on one of these councils, regardless of what the administration is doing, said Michael Strain, an economist at the conservative American Enterprise Institute. From left, Brian Kranich, chief executive of Intel, Kevin Plank, the founder of Under Armour, and Kenneth C. Frazier, chief of Merck, resigned from a presidential advisory panel on Monday. Ethan Miller. Getty Images. Steve Marcus. Reuters. Mario Tama. Getty Images. But as Mr. Trump continues to rile his critics, the chief executives at his side are facing questions about their support for an administration mired in controversy. The resignations began on Monday, as Mr. Frazier announced he would step down from the Manufacturing Council. Mr. Trump swiftly criticized Mr. Frazier on Twitter, and for much of the day, the Merck chief executive was the lonely voice of opposition in the business world. But late Monday, Kevin Plank of Under Armour and Brian Kranich of Intel announced they, too, were stepping down from the panel. The departures from the advisory groups in recent days follow similar steps by the chief executives of Uber, Tesla and Disney in recent months. On Monday, other executives said it was important to have a seat at the table. We believe it continues to be important for Campbell to have a voice and provide input on matters that will affect our industry, our company and our employees in support of growth, the Campbell Soup Company said in a statement, adding that its chief executive, Denise Morrison, will remain on the Manufacturing Council. Dell, the computer maker, said its founder and chief executive, Michael Dell, would continue to advise the president as a way to share our perspective on policy issues that affect our company, our customers and our employees. Those who stepped down spoke in often personal terms about their motivations. Mr. Kranich, the chief executive of Intel, was the most forthcoming of the CEOs who have moved away from their advisory roles. In a blog post late on Monday, Mr. Kranich explained his thinking. I resigned because I want to make progress, while many in Washington seem more concerned with attacking anyone who disagrees with them, Mr. Kranich said. We should honor, not attack, those who have stood up for equality and other cherished American values. Mr. Plank, the chief executive of Under Armour, spoke of the tension between wanting to engage with decision-makers in Washington, but being turned off by excessive politicization. I joined the American Manufacturing Council because I believed it was important for Under Armour to have an active seat at the table and represent our industry, he said. We remain resolute in our potential inability to improve American manufacturing. However, Under Armour engages in innovation and sports, not politics. Follow David Gels at Gels and Kate Kelly at Kat Eckerly on Twitter. Patty Cohen and Rachel Abrams contributed reporting.